Section 3 of our text in chapter 6 deals with the language of responsibility. Part of our obligation in an interpersonal message is to make the message clear. We must as well be willing to take responsibility for our personal beliefs, our feelings, our actions, and what we say verbally. Whether you accept or reject responsibility in terms of your language usage tells us a lot about you, and it certainly can shape the tone of a relationship with whomever that might be. So what is accountable language? One way of shifting away from accountable language is through some subtle language choices. You can make your statements more accountable by avoiding basically two things. One is the use of it, and the other one is the use of but. It statements. Listen to these. It's worrying when you're late. I'm worried when you're late. Notice the difference? It's a bad idea. I don't think that's a good idea. It's a problem. I see it as a problem. So it statements replaces the personal pronoun I and me with its. By contrast, on the other hand, I language clearly identifies the speaker as the source of a message or of the opinion, and communicators who use it statements avoid ownership of a message. It's not a matter of being imprecise. It's sort of a subtle, potentially unconscious way for someone to avoid taking a position. It might also be a very face-saving way to help the other person save face. So, we have to look at this from both sides. But statements can be quite confusing. You say one thing, and then you insert the word but to say something that sort of goes against what you've said previously. But has the effect of canceling out the thought or idea that preceded it. You're a really good person, but I think we ought to stop seeing each other. You've done good work for us, but we're going to have to let you go. This paper has some good ideas, but I'm giving it a grade of D because it's late. Now, just like I said about its statement, but statements can be a face-saving strategy worth using at times. If you're going to say two different things, one positive and negative, it might be best just to break the sentence into two separate sentences, two separate ideas, or maybe even replacing but with and. So you want to acknowledge both parts of the statement without appearing to contradict yourself. We can use I, you, and we language to be more effective communicators. I language is a way of accepting responsibility for your message. You language, by contrast, expresses a judgment or an opinion of the other person. Positive judgments, you did a great job, is not problematic. But if you say something like, you left this place a mess, or you didn't keep your promise, or you really are crude sometimes, you tend to raise the other person's self-defense mechanisms. That's what you language tends to do. And yet at the same time, we have to be careful because sometimes we want to use you language to help the other person accept responsibility and not deflect that responsibility. It depends on the nature of the relationship, and it depends on whether the other person tends to shift away from taking responsibility. So when you arouse defensiveness, it means that you as the speaker, you are qualified to judge the target. And most people are not willing to accept that. I language provides a more accurate and less provocative way to express a complaint. And so when you use I language, you can describe your reaction to someone's behavior taking responsibility for your statement without expressing judgment. Communicators who use these kinds of I messages engage in assertiveness, again, depending on the context. It might be considered less assertive. Clearly expressing your thoughts, feelings, and wants. Assertive messages are composed of 3 different types of I statements. One describes the other person's behavior, one describes your feelings, and one describes the consequences the other person's behavior has for you. Here's some examples. I get embarrassed, you're feeling, when I hear you talk about my poor grades in front of our friends, the behavior you observed. I'm afraid they'll think I'm stupid, the possible consequences. So there's the feeling, there's the behavior you observed, and there's the possible consequences. When the chances of being misunderstood or getting a defensive reaction are high, and that's a key in this whole section, it's a good idea to include all 3 elements in your assertive message. In some cases, however, only using 1 or 2 will get the job done. I'm feeling annoyed. The feeling. Because I went to a lot of trouble fixing this dinner and now it's cold. Of course, the behavior is obvious. So even the best constructed and best delivered I message won't always receive a non-defensive response. And similarly, I language in large doses sounds self-centered rather than other-oriented. Research shows that self-absorbed people, also known as conversational narcissists, can be identified by their constant use of first-person singular pronouns. So for this reason, I language works well in moderation. One way to avoid the overuse of I language is to consider the pronoun we. We language implies that the issue is the concern and responsibility of 2, both the speaker and the receiver of a message. Here's some examples. We have a problem. We can't seem to talk about money without fighting. We aren't doing a very good job of keeping the apartment clean, are we? We need to talk to your parents about whether we'll visit them for the holidays. We language certainly can build a constructive, less defensive climate. It suggests a kind of we're in this together orientation, what is known as verbal immediacy. And so couples who use we language are more satisfied and manage conflict better than those who rely mostly on I and you pronouns. We talk is also helpful for couples when one partner is dealing with a health issue or substance abuse. Using plural pronouns suggests the problem is ours rather than mine or yours. On the other hand, using we language can be presumptuous and even demanding, because now you seem to be speaking for the other person as well as for yourself. You might say, we have a problem, and they might say, well, maybe you have a problem, but don't tell me I do. So look at table 6.2 in the text, and it shows you the different types of language. We can use I, you, and we, the pros and the cons and the recommendations. Because too much of any single pronoun comes across as inappropriate, combining them is a really good idea. And it suggests you're able to see things from multiple perspectives. If your I language reflects your position without you being perceived as overly self-absorbed, your you language will shows your concern and support for others without judging them, and your we language includes others without speaking for them, then your mix of pronouns will probably be close to ideal. The words that follow your pronouns are also important ingredients in responsible communication. Notice the following sentences. I have to talk to my neighbor about the barking dog. I should be nicer to my roommate. I ought to be more assertive. I can't take this anymore. I had no choice. I had to tell her. So when you read those lines, it sounds somber and a sense of ought or moral responsibility, and you were left with a sense of pressure and heaviness that you didn't have a choice. Notice how the same sentence will sound more positive and a sense of choice by changing and moving away from I should or I ought or I had no choice. I'm going to talk to my neighbor. I will start being nicer. I am determined to take this more. I decided to tell her. The first list describes choices instead of obligations. This list, the wording focuses on decisions that you will make, not grudging acquiescence or, yeah. You probably found the second list more motivating than the first, and certainly research supports this notion. Labeling a goal as have to increases emotional stress and decreases the likelihood of achieving that goal. However, turning it into a self-motivated choice certainly facilitates goal achievement. Well, that's the essence of section 3. Thank you.